Well, good afternoon. I wanted to increase your productivity, and I'm worried about you all. This is a ring I made for Patrick as a present. Pat is the video teacher here at KPIS school, and his family's involved with the church, so I made him a ring with a bronze cross on it. I started out with a strip of silver, and I pre-hammered the silver. In other words, I put a pattern into it with a special hammer, and I'm going to reinforce that pattern a little bit further on in the video. You'll see the hammer that I used. I struck the metal, the strip of metal, on an angle so it looks a little bit like tree bark, but it's very attractive, and you can use many different kinds of hammers to texture metal. Of course, when you hit silver, the one thing you have to remember is that silver gets harder, so you have to keep annealing. So this is the one thing I have to keep going over with students and reinforcing the idea that annealing is a process that you do over and over again as you're making something. It's not, you don't do it one time. You do it throughout the whole process of manufacturing the ring through all the steps. So filing, everything you do to metal, when you hit it, when you twist it, when you pull it, it makes it harder, and you have to, in order to make your job as a craftsman easier, you have to go back, heat the metal up to a light red color, and drop it into water immediately, not wait, immediately. This vise that I'm using is basically an engraving vise, so it rotates on a bearing, and I love it. I use it for rings all the time. I'm using a round nose pliers here. This takes a lot of doing to get the two edges to butt against each other 100% in alignment. That's the secret word, alignment. So in a lot of this video, you're going to find that I really took my time showing you various scenes, and that's because it's labor intensive, and this will take you about 2 class periods. It'll take you about 90, maybe 2 90-minute periods to make this simple ring. If you get good, you can make it in 1 90-minute period, but I always underestimate the skills of the student. I'm using a special torch here. It's a hydrogen torch. It's actually too hot for the job. I'm applying the silver solder with a heat tweezer, a locking heat tweezer. So I'm just dropping on a little silver, and in that torch with the hydrogen torch, it's almost 2 times hotter than the torch at your bench that uses LPG and oxygen. Hydrogen is the new fuel of the future. It's going to be used for cars, and the beautiful part about using hydrogen as a fuel is that the only thing you release into the world is water. So hydrogen is a great gas. So this hydrogen is coming from drinking water, tap water, and it's actually done with a machine that I bought, and it's quite expensive. But a hydrogen torch is very hot, and you can solder much more immediately. So I soldered the inside of the ring for strength. This is the hammer that I used to texture the ring. It's called a tinsmith's hammer. When it looks like that, it has a face like a regular hammer in the front, square, and then it has usually a line on the back of it. I polished that. First I made it, I ground it to a fine line, and then I polished it to give it a sort of a roundness to it. So that's a polish, and you never hit silver without touching it to something that's polished. Okay? Now my steel block has been prepared with a piece of tape. It's the kind of tape you use for packaging. So I can't emphasize this enough. You wouldn't texture metal if you didn't polish the steel that you're hitting it with. So this is very important, because if you use a rusty hammer, you're going to oxidize the ring and work harden rust into the silver. So you don't want to do that. Make sure your tools are clean. And that includes your 4 pliers at your bench. Okay? Now, if you tell me this video is long, I'm not going to listen to you because you have no idea about the labor that's required. So this video, I would say, is half as long as the actual process, maybe a quarter as long as the actual process. So my edits to speed things along, because I know people, the children that I teach, and in today's age, kids have no patience. So I'm using the flexible shaft here with a grinder, an actual grinder. This grinder is a bullet-shaped wheel, or a bullet-shaped form that has impregnated micro abrasive particles into it. So you can't see it, but if you look at it critically, you'll see these little shiny things in it. I've just changed to another one. This is made out of rubber, and it has the abrasive built right into the wheel. So don't put any extra abrasive, like any compounds on it. You shouldn't do that. It's already cutting metal. So as it goes along, the one thing I want to get rid of, I want to prepare it and get it cleaned, and I want to get rid of the hump of solder that's in the inside, because I actually over soldered this ring. There's too much solder inside, and it's evident. I want it to look like one piece of metal. So with this abrasive rubber wheel that's impregnated with abrasive dust, and I'm telling you, it's microscopic dust, but you will see glints of light in it once in a while, and you'll notice that it is really particles of abrasive. So this takes a long time, and I sometimes go backwards and go back to this wheel again if I notice that, oh, there's still a little bit too much silver. You can notice where the soldering joint is. So I'll go back to this wheel, because this wheel is very aggressive, and it really polishes and cleans the inside of the ring. Now, with the key provided, I'm going to change the tip to a felt tip. So this is made out of felt, which is a material that years ago, lots of hats are made out of felt. And I don't know if you know what felt looks like, but it's a kind of, I would say it's really a type of cloth, but it's made with a chemical process to bind it together. But it is a material that's very much like fabric. Although it's not fabric, it's felt. So years ago, that's what everybody used. I'm using it with this compound. Now, this is a greasy compound, again with microscopic abrasive particles in it. So this is grease and very waxy, and you have to go back to this block every few seconds to build up, to coat that felt wheel. Otherwise, the wheel does nothing. So when you use a felt wheel, you're going to constantly charge it up with compound. This brown compound is sort of a medium grade cutting compound. So it embeds itself in the wheel, the bullet-shaped wheel, and then you go and you start shining. And your technique is very important. You cannot hold the ring. If you do, you'll get burnt, and I mean you really will get burnt. You'll have a brown burnt-in circle in your hand, on your fingers. So don't try to touch this, because the friction is very, very high, especially with the abrasive compound charged onto that bullet wheel. So you'll go back and you'll keep impregnating the wheel, the felt wheel, with compound, this waxy substance. Now, you ask me, are there different kinds of compound? Yes, there are. There are about 5 different kinds. The finest one that brings it to the highest polish is a French word. It's rouge. But rouge means red. So the compound, you can tell it because it's not brown, it's red. And I'm talking about a deep red color. And there's some compounds that are white and some are blue, and they're intermediate abrasives. but I don't usually go through all those steps of using different compounds. And you need a different bullet for each compound. You can't mess up the compound that's on there by traveling to other compounds while you're doing this. So you're only going to be using the brown compound. Now this is my home shop. You see how cluttered my workbench is, but I love this workshop. I'm up there hours into the night designing things on my iPad and then making them in precious metal. And this process goes back 4,000 years. Of course they didn't have these kind of tools. They did everything by hand in those very early days of jewelry. But jewelry historically goes back 4,000 years. And if you want to be dog-jai, go to the British Museum when you're in England. Go to the British Museum and go to the Egyptian exhibit. And you'll see jewelry and you'll wonder how the hell they made these things. Beautiful flies and beetles, all made out of solid gold. And the Egyptians were fantastic craftsmen. So the beetle is a sacred, it's called a scarab, and it's a very sacred symbol to the Egyptians. And so is the housefly. It's also a sacred symbol. And you'll see bracelets with flies on them and with beetles on them. But going to the British Museum is an experience. It's a very, very old museum and a very huge, it's just a wonderful place with such culture. So if you go to England, you don't go to the British Museum, man, you missed a piece of England. And there is also the Dollhouse Museum and many great museums in England, in London. So if you get a chance, go and look at the Egyptian. Did you notice I just dropped the ring? That's going to happen to you. And then you're going to see the top of my head as I search the floor to find the ring that fell out of the ring holder that I made. I made these ring holders for each bench in my room because you can't hold the ring unless you're holding it in leather. And this is a very good way to get a handle on the ring while you buff it with a felt buff, a felt bullet buff and compound. And you notice this takes a long time. You can go in little circles and make sure you do it. But the one thing that I try to get everybody to do is when you do your work, look at it, inspect your work. It's not magic. It's whether you do a complete job or not. So every part of making this ring, you have to look at the finish, determine if it needs more. Lots of querying as you work as to the way it's coming out. So your brain has to be going along with your muscle activity, and you're assessing as you work. So you look at things very carefully. And don't forget to do that when you work. Inspect your work as you work. Check it out. Now this leaves a black interior, very dirty looking interior, because it's remnants of that compound, that waxy greasy compound called compound. And that abrasive material is all over the inside and it turns black. Kid says, hey, it's not getting shiny. They call it shiny. Well, no, there is no luster because there's a film of dirt on the inside. But if you take thinner, which is very dangerous by the way, you must have goggles on. This is the key for the chuck so you can change tips. So take a good look at that key. You need that to open that chuck and put different tips in. So this is a wider shaft, so I needed to open the chuck a little bit. And this is also a rubber cylinder. It's just a rubber cylinder. Again, you don't use compound here because you'll see the sparkles of abrasive in it, and that is silica. So Of course, you're going to also, I can't stress enough that you should have your dust mask on. You don't want to get this into your esophagus or into your lungs, okay? For a long range of disorders and diseases. So be sure that you're wearing a mask, a good mask. The same thing that you would have worn when we were going through the COVID days, the COVID-19 days. So this cylinder, again, I'm going around. You do see it a little bit more, having a little bit more luster. Of course, you wouldn't say the word luster. You would say shiny. It's not shiny, Mr. Hartberg, inside. Well, it's a luster that you build up. Silver is one of the most reflective metals of all the metals, even of gold. So gold can be made to look shiny. You can buff it up and make it look shiny. But nothing takes a luster, not platinum, not any other metal, like silver. And that's why mirrors are coated on the back with silver. So all glass mirrors have a silver coating on the back, which is done through an electroplating process. So that silver takes the highest luster. And you'll actually be able to see yourself in the ring. And when you take that away, after you clean it with some thinner, which cuts the grease, you'll be able to see it. So here I am looking at the job I just did, and to see how it looks inside, and I'm looking for any evidence of soldering. I don't want anybody to see the soldering. I want it to look like one ring. And if you do that, well, you should be in the movie The Lord of the Rings. Okay? Now we're going to address the side, and I'm in that engraving vise that's on a bearing, so you can turn it real easy. I'm using a broad file now across the top, and I'm going to turn it 15 degrees each time and go across the top. I want the top to be essentially flat and the two sides to be parallel in this ring. This is a man's ring. It's 15 gauge. Sometimes you can make rings out of 16 gauge, 17 gauge. There'll be less silver and the ring won't be as heavy, but I like heavy rings, so that feel like rings, that feel like they came out of the movie Lord of the Rings. So that's why it's 15 gauge. But a lot of jewelers use, for a woman, they feel this is too masculine, and but a lot of girls like masculine stuff these days, especially. So you might make a ring for a girlfriend or your mother out of 17 gauge. That's okay. It will be still very strong. The higher the number, the thinner the metal. You notice I'm looking at the side of the ring and pointing out incongruities where it doesn't look parallel or flat. And the reason I'm showing you a lot of these clips are in real time because it's consuming. It's time consuming if you do a good job, you do the right job. Now, some kids ask me, Mr. Hopper, if you're not going to see the inside of the ring, why do you have to spend so much time on it? Well, I could say, hey dummy, would you buy a ring that's not finished inside? This is a trade you're learning. And you do every step of the trade 100% perfect if you can. And this is craft. This is craft. And normally I would give real grades like A, B, C, and I would inspect your work, and your grade would be dependent on all the steps you did and if you did it properly, and it really looks like a commercial item in a store, and you want to be proud when you give this to somebody. So don't get at me for making this video 19 minutes of suffering. Pay attention to what I'm saying to you. There is a trade going on here that's been around for hundreds of years, so thousands of years actually. Notice I put a piece of packing tape down on top of my steel block, and that's because I don't want to injure if I decide to texture this or flatten it with a mallet, a wooden mallet, I don't want it to get injured or pick up any texture from the stainless steel block that's underneath it. So one trick is to soften it a little bit with a piece of cloth tape. In this case, I'm using that threaded nylon packing tape. You just put it on your square steel block and to protect the ring. Now I can make a decision as a designer. Do I want to texture the side, or do I like it smooth? What do I want to do? Well, I'm going to continue with finishing the inside, and I'm using a ring lap now, and this also is impregnated with microscopic silica particles that are in there, and they come in larger particles and smaller particles. You notice that's not running quite true, but when I hold that wooden fixture that I made to hold the ring, it'll make the thing run true. And I'm going back and forth, up and down, as the inside ring lap is spinning. So I'm guarantee you that I'm going to get a very even surface inside. And this is a little bit going backwards, you know, but it ensures me that that ring is going to be like a mirror inside. Now I'm putting on a felt lap. So that's called a felt inside ring lap. Can you remember that? A felt inside ring lap. And I'm going to charge it with compound, the brown compound that has microscopic particles of abrasive in it. And you charge it over and over again. So part of the length of this video is me emphasizing that when you go through steps, make sure you inspect your work after each step. I can't say that enough, because you see that's so hot that it's actually smoking. Can you see the smoke? If you try to hold that ring in your hand while you're doing that, you will lose your fingerprints. You will burn your fingerprints right off your fingers. So this fixture is wonderful because it holds the ring. And I made 19 of these for my classes, so you should have one of these wooden ring holders in your desk. It's a very important tool that will protect you from getting burned, because there's no way you can hold that except maybe with a piece of leather. Again, you see I went back again and charged it. So everything I'm saying to you, I'm showing you in real time. I could have done a gimmicky time-lapse movie that gets you through all the steps, but then you won't get a concept of how long it takes to really do this well. So I apologize to my non-technical audience and friends of mine that are watching this video. I hope you're watching it, but it really is labor intensive. Now we come to a wheel that is made out of bed sheets. And bed sheets, like the sheets on your bed, are made out of material called muslin. It's a very cheap material. And there may be 150 layers of muslin there sewn with a very strong sewing machine together. So all those layers of muslin are there. That's a very soft wheel. And of course you charge it with the compound before you start. Again, if you're going to touch that ring, touch it with leather. Don't touch it if it's still hot. So you take the compound and you just hold it against. I'm using, I think, a different color here because this is a little finer. And now I'm going to start to buff the metal, the surface, to a final luster, final shine, you know. Please don't use the word shiny. It's like you're in the 4th grade. Use the word luster for metal. We're building a luster, and that's what you're doing. Now this ring is heavily textured. So if you shine it up, when you buff it, there I go with the word shine it up again. If you buff it to a luster, don't buff it so much that you lose the texture. So that would be really dumb. And why I'm telling you this, because
I've had kids come up to me and say, Mr. Hogberg, it doesn't have a luster anymore, and the hammering is disappeared. What do I do? Well, you got to take that hammer and repeat it on a ring bar. It's got to be backed up with steel. So you can defeat the whole purpose of the ring is the texture. So don't go and buff it so much that you eliminate the texture on the ring. That would be a real tragedy. So I'm doing the sides now, and as you do it, you rotate it 15 degrees, and it takes a long time to do the sides. You'll notice a magnificent difference in the edges. They become sort of half round, and they look very, very finished. And after I do this, I'm going to make a decision whether I'm going to texture the edge on the ring. So you'll make that decision. And again, you have a choice of punches and hammers, lots of different kinds of hammers. Like you can use a ball peen hammer, which has a round parabolic head, and that'll put little cuspids as you go around the edge of the ring. It'll put little craters like on the moon around the edge, and that looks beautiful. It throws back light. It's called specular highlights, and you'll retain these specular highlights by putting a texture in the edge of the ring. So you do that after you polish it, and of course the hammer that you use, you go to the buffing machine and buff it up, whether it's a straight line hammer like the back of a tinsmith's hammer, or if it's a ball peen hammer, you polish up the ball on the hammer to a mirror, and then when you strike the silver, you have a mirrored texture. You're not really disturbing and ruining the surface. Look at your tools critically before you choose them and make decisions. These are creative decisions. Now these are rings that I was hoping you could make for your whole family during Christmas. And I have these plush, wonderful boxes that look so professional, and you'll wrap them beautifully, because wrapping a present is an art. And you'll make a beautiful card with your exceptionally beautiful handwriting. So I take it over to the sink in my workshop. This is right behind our cafe, and I scrub it with dish soap to clean it. But you can clean it faster with thinner. But with thinner, if you use a brush like this, if any thinner hits you in the eye, you're blind. So thinner is very serious stuff. It's not only bad for you to breathe it into your lungs, but it's also bad that if it hits sensitive tissue like your eyes, the mucosa on your eye, that means the liquid almost surface of the eye, thinner will blind you instantly. You'll be screaming if you get it in your eye. So you must wear goggles. Now when you scrub like this, you're using soap and water, so there's nothing to really worry about. But you just use more dish soap, and that's like a hand brush. And now I'm truing it again. This is like a backward step again. On the steel ring bar to make sure that that ring is really a circle, is really a perfect circle. This is a geometric shape, and if it's not perfect, you'll see it right away. So I hit it with a wooden hammer so it doesn't damage anything that I've done. And then I'm going to go back again and clean it again with the inside bullet buff and compound to bring it to a luster. But I've decided here that I'm going to texture that edge, the outside edge on both sides. So I'm going to bring back my tinsmith's hammer, and I'm going to put little lines all around it. And because the hammer is polished, now the lines are going to throw back light from the edge of the ring. And now it's up to you. You may want a smooth edge on the ring as a contrast to the surface of the ring, which is deeply textured. So sometimes kids don't want to texture the edge. They've textured the ring and they want a smooth, shiny edge. That's we would call it half round edge on the ring.
But in this case, I decided that I'm going to make the whole ring have this handmade look. And I'm going to go around that ring, overlapping hits with the edge of the tinsmith's hammer. And don't forget that edge that on the tinsmith's hammer, I polished it first before I do this. Always polish your tools before you touch silver, okay? And gold and platinum. Platinum is more expensive than silver. Gold is more expensive than silver. Some people like platinum. I don't like platinum. But a lot of people getting married, they want the ring to have intrinsic value in terms of money, how much it's worth. So you don't find many people that make each other a silver ring to get married. They always want gold or platinum, you know, or a rose gold or a color of gold. You know, I like yellow gold. It's beautiful. But I can't afford it. It's 37,000 baht for 1 baht of gold right now in Thailand, and that price is going up, and that's why people buy gold. They put it in their safe. They buy gold ingots because it's safety against inflation. So they can always sell that gold at a higher price than they bought it, because the price of these metals goes up exponentially. Sometimes it goes down, but it changes every day. So the price of silver changes every day. And you can actually look it up on Google. You can find out what is pure silver selling for. You'll find that you paid more because you actually paid my traveling cost to get to the place, which is 2 hours away. And normally it's out of pocket for me to take a taxi and buy your pure silver. But I'm sure I'm not being scammed where I buy it. They know me for 20 or almost 30 years now. And I can be assured that when I buy silver, it's 100% silver. And that's what you have. So at the very end, we'll weigh your ring. If I give you the strip of metal, and that's how you pay me back, and you made something that's going to last for the next 50 years.